Have you ever seen one of these rainbows and thought, well, that looks easy to make? Well, I'm here to tell you, it is easy, and I'm going to show you how to do it in this video. But before we jump into it, I want to let you know that I do offer these DIY kits. You can check out the description below if you're interested. It's got most of the materials you need, everything is cut and measured out, and there's even a tapestry needle and wooden bead to get you started. Anyway, let's set that aside and begin. Alright, here's what you need. For this rainbow, we're going with 3 strands of 8mm macrame cord, along with 2mm cord with your choice of colors, a wooden bead, and a tapestry needle. And again, this is what's all included in the DIY rainbow kits, so if you don't feel like sourcing out material yourself, I got you covered. And finally, these are the rest of the tools you will need to complete the project. So I'm going to start with the smallest arch using the light tan color here. It is made out of cotton. I do like cotton because it is very durable and it just holds the structure of the arches really nicely. Now this is where you get to decide how long you want your fringe to be. I like to give myself maybe an inch, inch and a half. I'm going to tuck the end under and over like so. Use one hand to hold that in place while the other begins to wrap the cord around, and you're gonna just tuck that end in as you go. You're also gonna notice a bit of a seam there, and I'm gonna keep that on the top for this one, so that when we glue the strands together, it'll give it a nice clean look. And that's really all there is to it. You just continue on like so, wrapping it around and around, manipulating that shape so you can get a nice arch, making sure there's no gaps, so you want the cord butted up against each other nice and tight. And then you just keep going until the fringe is even, and you have your first shape. So now to tie this off, I just use my finger and wrap the cord around so that there's a bit of a loop there. And I'm going to take my end here. I gave myself way too much here, but that's okay. And just slide it through very carefully. And you're just going to tighten it up. And I try my best to keep the seam on the top, just like on the other side, so it's symmetrical. And we're also going to pretend my camera is focusing properly so that you can have a nice clear picture of how that looks. There we go. And I can see there's a bit of a gap there. Sometimes that happens, and you can just kind of scooch them around so that it looks good. There we go, and that's our first one. We'll worry about the fringe and sewing in that end later, but let's move on and create our other pieces. Grab your neck size up for the middle arch. I'm going to use the same cotton cord as before, but in white. If you're using your own materials, feel free to play around with different kinds of yarn like wool or acrylic. You can even get creative and use ribbon or fabric, so feel free to play around with that. Now with this arch, I try to line up the colors as much as possible, keeping the fringe close to the same length. So then when we put it together, it'll just be that much easier to line them up. So we're just going to do the same thing here, wrapping that end around, holding it nice and tight. And we're just going to keep the seam up on this one as well. And then once you've got a couple wraps around there, I just take the other one and line it up so that it looks even when they're together. Then we'll go ahead and wrap this guy up. Once that one is finished, you're just going to take your first piece you made and line it up to make sure all the ends are lined up there. So don't worry if it's warpy. That'll sort itself out when we glue them together later. So I think that looks great. And then I just work my fingers around, keeping it nice and tight together. And then you're gonna see that the one end is a little longer. So then we just unwrap a couple strands until that looks good. Perfect. Now we will just tie it off as we did before, holding it tight. And then we'll do one final comparison to make sure that's all lined up nicely. Awesome. Now let's go ahead and finish our third and final strand. Now it is essential that during this part in the process, you line up all your ends and just take a moment, enjoy it. All right, now it's time to grab your tapestry needle and tuck in those loose ends. You may have noticed I trimmed this one because it was just way too long, ridiculous, and I will be doing that with the other ones as well. So you're just gonna thread your needle and then we're gonna just sew in through the first kind of gap there. Two important tips here. If you did not wrap your thread around too tight and you did not put lotion on your hands, your needle should just pull through nice and easy with no trouble at all. Yeah, that definitely did not take pliers to pull through. After you've finagled all those ends in and trimmed off the excess, it is time to attach your thread for hanging. So you want to find the middle of your strand, the biggest one. So you can just take a measuring tape. Sometimes I do just eyeball it, but if we're going to go for precision here, we're going to use the measuring tape and find the center. And it looks like we're at about 6.5 inches. So we're going to find the center there, 3.25. Grab your string and fold it in half. And then place your strand on top, making sure it's centered. Now we're going to tie what is called a lark's head knot. So grab your ends and just simply tuck it through that loop, then pull it tight. And I see mine slipped off the center a little bit, but that's where the eyeballing comes in. And I'd say that looks pretty good. Okay, now it's time to attach our wooden bead. Some people choose to have no bead, or in this case, we're just doing the one. You can do two, you can play around with different sizes. So once again, you have a lot of freedom with your creativity there. So just grab your tapestry needle, thread in both ends. You will see here, I struggled. This did not want to pull through again. But what you can do is also just thread in one string at a time if you know, this kind of scenario happens. But we did get it through eventually. And now we just gotta tie a little knot just to secure that on there. So I just, once again, use my finger to make a bit of a loop. And then you just kind of squeeze your way in there and pull the ends through. And you're just trying to get that knot to be right up against the bead, so it's not sliding around and too loose. And that feels good. Okay, onto the home stretch. Time to attach all of our pieces. So make sure your hot glue gun is all fired up and ready to go. And I'm just gonna start with the smallest one in the centerpiece. Then we're gonna grab our glue gun and just apply a small line to start, just so we can get it anchored together. And you're gonna wanna work fairly quickly because that glue does dry fast. So we just stick the end on there always lining it up. And you only have to clamp it for a few seconds and it should bond together. All right, let's attach the rest. And there's our sweet little rainbow. Now it's just time to comb out that fringe. So grab your handy dandy fork. Yep, we're using a fork, and you can just use the prongs to comb out that fringe. At home I use a carding brush, but I figured most of you don't have a carding brush lying around, so we're using the fork. If you don't like the wavy look of the fringe, you can just gently steam them out. Okay, we're on to the last step. Grab your scissors and trim up that fringe. And it's done! One little macrame rainbow. I hope you had fun, and if this was helpful, I invite you to like and comment below. Let me know how yours turned out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.